service. All right, is this mic working? We're good? We're set? I think it's not wigging out yet, so I think we'll probably be okay. That's great. So a few weeks ago, actually, if you're curious, it was January 1st at 11:22 a.m., something amazing happened. One of the greatest moments in my disc golf career was hit. I stepped up onto the tee box, and this is what it looks like. This is the tee box that I stepped up on. There's a lot of trees in there, and for those of you who don't know, the basket that I'm trying to aim for is way in the back. The next slide shows it a little bit better through all those trees, right? So I stepped up onto that tee box. I grabbed one of my favorite discs, the In of a Pig, and I lined up my shot, I practiced, and I threw it. And it was perfect. It flew perfectly, it curved just right, bang, it hit the chains, right in there. It was amazing, it was incredible. Yes, thank you. This wasn't just any ace for me. This is the kind of ace you replay in your mind. You think about it at night and you replay it. It's the kind you casually bring up in unrelated conversations, right? The weather's been weird and foggy lately. That reminds me of that time I aced hole 13 at Fuller Lake. I felt unstoppable. I felt chosen, almost biblical. I thought, this is it. This is what life is about, right? Man. Now, the weird part about it is about 5 minutes later, I wanted another one. And not just another one, I wanted a better one from further away, that was more impressive, with more witnesses, preferably filmed in slow motion with some dramatic music in the background. And then somewhere between celebrating and scrolling through highlights of disc golf on YouTube, I had this quiet thought. Wait, why wasn't that enough? I got what I wanted, and it still wasn't enough. And that's when I realized this isn't a disc golf problem, this is a human problem. We build our lives around if-only statements. If I just get that job, if I just fix that relationship, if I just reach that goal, if I just hit that ace. We think that fulfillment is just one achievement away. And then we finally get there, and our hearts quietly ask, so what's next? And suddenly we're right back where we started. That question, what's the point, what's next, is exactly what Ecclesiastes has been wrestling with. We're in the middle of our sermon series on Ecclesiastes called What's the Point? And before we dive into our passage today, I think it helps to know where Ecclesiastes fits in the Bible. The book of Ecclesiastes is part of the wisdom literature of the Bible. And the wisdom books in the Bible help us understand how to live well in God's world. Instead of focusing on laws and history, they explore real-life questions about choices, about suffering, about meaning, and about relationships. Books like Proverbs, Job, Psalms, Ecclesiastes, Song of Songs show that wisdom is more than just being smart. It's learning to see life from God's perspective and then practicing that every day. While a book like Proverbs often says, this is how life should work out for us, Ecclesiastes asks the harder question, what happens when it doesn't work out that way for us? In the first few chapters of Ecclesiastes, we've heard some great stuff from Christian, and he introduced us to this teacher that looks at everything that people chase. They chase success, they chase pleasure, wisdom, work, wealth, and the teacher keeps on coming to the same conclusion. It all feels meaningless. He describes the loneliness of striving, the frustration of injustice, and the emptiness of doing life by yourself. But then, in the middle of this very honest realization that he's having, he points us towards something different. Our scripture this morning is from Ecclesiastes 4, 7-12. It says this, again, I saw something meaningless under the sun. There was a man all alone. He had neither son nor brother, and there was no end to his toil. His eyes were not content with his wealth. For whom am I toiling, he asked. Why am I depriving myself of enjoyment? This, too, is meaningless, a miserable business. Two are better than one, because if they have good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up, but pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Also, if two lay down together, they will keep warm, but how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. Solomon's describing this person who is wildly productive, but deeply alone. Busy, successful, driven, but with no one to share life with. And he asks this haunting question: who am I doing this for? What is the point? And that's a question that hits close to home. We live in a world that celebrates independence. I don't need anyone. I got this. I'm a self-made human. But Ecclesiastes then whispers something a little uncomfortable. Success without community is still emptiness. You can have a full schedule and an empty soul. You can have the big house and a small life. You can have hundreds of followers or people around you and 0 real friends. It's said that we have never been more connected digitally and more disconnected relationally. I think Solomon would agree with that. And then I love how Solomon, he flips the script. He says, 2 are better than 1. If either of them fall down, one can help the other up. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. That's a passage that we often use, that you often hear at weddings. And it's beautiful. It really is, and I love it. But Solomon's point is bigger than romance. He's saying that you were never designed to do life alone. Community isn't a bonus feature of life, it's part of life's design. Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote it like this: the Christian needs another Christian who speaks God's word to him or her. Reminding us that faith was never meant to be a solo project. But if we're honest, we still try and live that way from time to time. It's just me and God. We're going to figure this out. I'm going to figure this out by myself. I don't really need church. Maybe I'll be a part of a few different churches and attend sometimes. Or I'll just watch online and not actually connect in an authentic way to other Christians. Ecclesiastes gently confronts us with a deeper truth. Isolation isn't wisdom, it's vanity. And then just when we think that, like Solomon is talking about relationship, he goes deeper. He doesn't stop at relationship. He traces the root of emptiness. Solomon isn't just diagnosing our social lives, he's diagnosing our spiritual lives. Because the truth is, loneliness isn't something just out there in the world, because we all feel that at different times. We've all felt lonely. Some of us feel lonely in a crowd. Some of us feel lonely in a marriage, feel lonely in leadership or in ministry or success, or even in silence. You can be surrounded by people and still feel unseen, unheard, and unknown. And Solomon helps us see that this kind of loneliness doesn't start with people, it starts deep within our soul. When our connection with God weakens, our connections with people do as well. We become more guarded, more busy, more independent, and before we know it, we are surrounded by people, but still alone. Our relationships tend to turn. They become more transactional instead of transformational. We become busy instead of meaningful, crowded but not connected. So in the next chapter, in chapter 5, Solomon shifts his focus and he turns it from the marketplace to the temple, from productivity and working to presence, from work to worship. And again, not because worship is a religious add-on, but it's because it's the foundation of everything else. In chapter 5 of Ecclesiastes, Solomon isn't speaking to atheists or outsiders. He's speaking to religious people, to church people, people who show up and sing songs and say prayers. These are some of his words in chapter 5. Guard your steps when you go into the house of God. Go near to listen rather than to offer the sacrifice of fools. Do not be quick with your mouth. Do not be hasty in your heart to utter anything before God. God is in heaven and you are on earth, so let your words be few. When you make a vow to God, do not delay to fulfill it. It is better not to make a vow than to make one and not fulfill it. Much dreaming and many words are meaningless. Therefore, fear God. Now, the word fear here doesn't refer to running from God in terror, but to stand before him in awe. Solomon isn't warning outsiders or pagans. He's warning worshipers. His message is simple, but it's a little unsettling for us because we can be physically near God and spiritually far away from him. We can show up to worship and still treat God casually. We can sing songs without thinking about what we're actually singing. We can pray without actually listening to God. We can make promises to God that we never intend to keep. A teacher once told me, and I love it, we don't need more noise in worship, we need more awe. And that's exactly what Ecclesiastes 5 is getting at. Solomon isn't saying, don't worship. He's saying, don't treat God like he's ordinary. He's not your assistant. He's not your AI buddy. He's not some cosmic vending machine that you put a prayer in and press a button and you just wait for a blessing to fall out. He is holy. Tozer says it like this: what comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us. In other words, your view of God shapes your entire life. And when your view of God shrinks, everything else in your life starts to feel smaller, and emptier, and more meaningless. So at first glance, you've got Ecclesiastes 4 and 5. They kind of feel like two different sermons, right? We're talking about relationships in chapter 4, and then we're talking about worship in chapter 5. But Solomon's doing something brilliant. He's showing us that the meaning of life is shaped by two different relationships. Relationships with people and our relationship with God. And the connection is when our reverence for God fades, the depth that we have in community fades as well. And when our community breaks down, life starts to feel empty. You could say it like this: meaning is where community and reverence meet. And that's exactly why Jesus summed up the whole law with two commands: love God and love people. Not one or the other, but both. Ecclesiastes kind of shows us this problem, and Jesus shows us the solution. Where Solomon exposes the emptiness of life without God and without community, Jesus steps in to restore both of them. Through Jesus, our relationship with God is healed. And our relationship with others is reimagined. On the cross, he reconnects us to God. He brings wholesomeness to us. It's not through our effort, it's through his grace. And he creates this new kind of community called the church. And it's not a people bound not just by friendship or similarity, but by love and forgiveness. Timothy Keller would say it like this: the gospel is this: we are more sinful and flawed in ourselves than we have ever dared believe. And yet, at the same time, we are more loved and accepted in Jesus Christ than we ever dared hope. I love how Keller says we and not I. Because the gospel was never meant to be a private experience. It was always meant to form a people. This reminds us that faith isn't just about me and God in isolation. It is about us and God in community. Christianity was never meant to be a solo sport. It's more like a team game, or at least doubles in disc golf, where you have a partner. And that's why Keller says we instead of I. In this one sentence, that's reverence and relationship brought together. Meaning and purpose found in knowing God and belonging to his people. Which is all well and good, but what about when we inevitably experience our life feeling meaningless? When we inevitably want more? What does that mean for us? Solomon invites us to do a couple things. The first would be rebuild your community. I want to ask you a gentle but honest question. Who really knows you? Not the online version of yourself, not your church smile or your church hair, not your I'm fine, but the real story. If your faith has no real friends, it's probably not going to last very long. And maybe the next step isn't another podcast or another book or another spiritual discipline. Maybe it's something simpler but harder. Joining a group, inviting someone for coffee, being honest with someone you trust, actually listening and learning from friends who care about you and mentors who know things, to stop doing life alone. Because Solomon would remind us that two are better than one. The second thing is, Solomon would invite us to rebuild our reverence. Because maybe for some of you, the issue isn't community. Maybe it's awe. We've gotten too familiar with God. We rush into worship. We multitask during a sermon or during prayer. We talk to God more than we listen to him. And what if this week you slowed down? You listened during prayer. You thought about the words that you were singing. And you approached God with wonder again. Ecclesiastes reminds us something simple but powerful. God is not ordinary, and life is never truly meaningful without him. When I think back to that disc golf ace, I realize something. For a short while, life was complete. That throw was perfect. The flight was beautiful. The chains sang. I felt unstoppable. I was borderline anointed. If Moses had a staff, I had a disc, right? I was there. But I wanted more. I wanted more. That quiet question rang in my head. Why wasn't this enough? Ecclesiastes doesn't say that life has no meaning. It says life loses meaning when we are disconnected from people and God. You can have success without meaning. You can have religion without reverence. You can have crowds without community. You can hit the line, you can reach the goal, but you can still feel empty inside. But when community and reverence come together, something shifts. Suddenly, life starts to make a bit more sense. So what's the point of life? It's not the answer 42. It's not independence. It's not achievements. It's not endless productivity. The point of life is connection with others and with God. Maybe today, the most spiritual thing you can do isn't chase that next ace or the next win or the next milestone, whatever it might be, or scroll endlessly looking for what's next or what might help you feel purpose. Again, maybe it's simpler, but harder. Maybe it's showing up for someone even when it feels awkward. Like bringing coffee to that person at work who never really seems to notice anyone or be noticed. Maybe it's asking, how are you really doing? And then actually really listening to people, even if they start to cry in front of you. Maybe it's being honest about your own struggles, your own doubts, your own mess. Maybe it's slowing down enough to notice God around you, to stop treating worship like a checklist and instead hear his voice in those quiet moments. Just like the hush you feel standing in a forest path, or the wind in the trees, or a friend checking on you and realizing that God is there with you. So draw closer to people who know your real story, closer to a God who knows you completely. Life isn't about hitting that perfect ace. You can throw the shot perfectly, hear the change, feel the rush, and still feel empty 5 minutes later. But the best part about disc golf and life is walking the course together, step by step, with friends who sees you and a God who knows you fully. And that's where real wins happen. The joy of connection is going to last longer than any perfect throw. Life isn't about hitting those chains or hitting whatever it is. It's about who's cheering you when you do and who's helping you when you miss. The point of life is connection with others and God. That's where meaning lives. Let's pray. God, thank you that we were never meant to do life alone. Teach us to slow down, to listen, to stand in awe of who you are. Help us draw closer to you and one another, where we have chased meaning